Hi, I'm Jack Berry, and today we are talking Northern Michigan golf with one of the greatest courses up there with a fine 1 mile ride to the top. It's the Alpine course at Boyne Mountain, and Bill Newcomb designed it.
We did. It was quite the project and quite the experience, I will say that. We had a long relationship. The Alpine experience started a relationship that lasted 21 years with Boyne, USA, and with Everett Kircher. So it was there's a lifetime of golf among there, of golf projects, of golf advice, of golf experiences.
Well, how did he tell you, I want a golf course on the other side of the ski mountain?
Well, it was pretty simple because there was no room on the ski side, and everything over there was going to be skiing. Don't think you're going to have golf over there. It was a great experience in routing that course, actually. And I got to the desk with Everett because I had won. Really, because I had won the Michigan Amateur and became known instantly around the state as a golf architect as well as a golfer. And Everett, in his marketing expertise, flew me up to Boyne Mountain, and so we sat down at the desk. And I'll never forget, I walked in, and here is a huge desk area. Littered with 2-foot topography maps of the Boyne project, of the Boyne Mountain project, and they'd crafted their own little sticks, and a pencil was a par 5, and and you could see, and they'd drawn in some things in it. They weren't getting there very fast, I could tell you, or they probably wouldn't have called me. But the reason I got there was not only because they knew I was a golf architect now, they knew I had some skills of that, and they had dealt with Robert Trent Jones a couple of years before that in designing a really fine golf course at the Boyne Highlands. But Robert Trent Jones didn't have the time to sit down and talk with Everett, and that was Everett's really true ability, was to sit down, talk with people, and completely and fully understand what the issue was. And he would let you have your opinion, and he had his opinion maybe, and you would meld and move forward. And so there they were at the table, melding their opinions, which was not gelling. And I walked in, and we spent 4 hours that morning before I got back in the old Blue Goose and flew back down home, and promptly then drove up there the next day. It was basically says, well, I said I have to get home, and had a meeting. He said, well, I want you back here. And so 2 days later, I was back there for 3 days and began to walk the site, and because they hired me on the spot then. So it was a great experience for me to learn what they didn't know about golf. They knew a lot about skiing. They knew everything about skiing. And some of that transferred in terms of earth moving. They had a lot of earth moving capability. Right. And if you don't want to delve in too much technical, but in the bulldozer field, if you're a small number like a D4, D6, D7, D8, you just get bigger as the numbers get bigger. Well, we started work up there with Everett with a D9, and was basically just knocking down trees and scraping it off. It wasn't long before he understood really, and he had seen this already with Trent Jones people, because Trent brought in small machines and his own operators, and Everett realized probably that was necessary. So we ended up getting smaller machines and so forth, but there we were looking at all these maps, and we began to willow it down. And there were a lot of conventions of the industry in that this goes from the private course sector, was right. The 9th hole will be back to the clubhouse because that's the way it was, and then 10 goes out and 18 comes back to the clubhouse. And it wasn't long before Everett understood, and I had promoted a little bit of this, and it was really from my playing down at Pinehurst that the 9th hole is, way out, and they really don't come back. And it's quote resort, and that's okay at a resort. The minute that was accepted as a planning for his golf course, we then opened up the site more, and that's what led to then the ability to move from the lake area, the Little Deer Lake area clubhouse, where we knew the clubhouse was going to be, to go ahead and go into the interior of the site. We drove to the top of the hill, and then we played down the hill for 18 holes. And that was the whole exercise was solved at that point. Then all I had to do was get down the mountainside. And that course has so many good memories of the ability to really work with Everett. And you would have to explain to Everett why you were, in fact, going to take this routing over that routing, because invariably you'll have 2 or 3 routings of a cluster of holes that you could use. And so we got rid of one cluster and we go to the next cluster. And of course, this is because the mountain, you had to work your way down the mountain to a usable spot. And it was all through that I got to know Everett and got to explain to him design theories. And I think all of those, we used every design theory I ever knew at the Alpine course. We used water, we used hills, we used high, we used low. Probably didn't use as many bunkers as maybe we could have, but it was a resort too.
Right.
You know.
Right. I mean, you don't want people to be out there forever.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be a Doral. Or Doral had already made its name with 1,000 bunkers. So
Yeah. Well, that and then the ride all the way up to the top and the great tee shot from on the first hole up there.
It is a great tee shot. I will say that. It's fun to do that. And there was more than one person who would turn around and come back to the pro shop and say, well, I think I got lost. So we did figure out we needed better signage going up, like you're halfway there.
Oh, that's a memorable course. As I mentioned that I did have a hole-in-one there on the third hole, playing with Everett and Chuck Mall and Art and my wife, and we were in a fivesome, but Everett owned the golf course, so that was no problem.
It was okay. Yeah. Well, there were some interesting things about when you own the golf course, you can dictate a few things. And one of the things that I remember pretty early in the game, and it was Everett was concerned about getting people around. He wasn't a proponent. If you went to him now and said, look, it's a 4-hour round, he wasn't so much that as just, don't take 6 hours, you know, and how are we going to do that? And he kept clearing back the edges, and, you know, all of that helped tremendously. But I remember at one point, and there must be a record of this somewhere, that he had come up with the idea, he and Chuck Mall had come up with the idea that we have a designated putter. This was little known among the people of Boyne, and I'm not sure it ever got outside the 4 walls, but I think it did. But Everett was convinced that putting was really unnecessary and not a good part of the game. He was always, if you remember about Everett, it was a yellow pants and white shoes. You remember his favorite? Well, that was a country clubber that came up from Detroit and wore yellow pants and white shoes. By God, that's the guy we want playing our golf course. But he didn't have to putt, you know. So he was, pick your designated putter if you're foursome and get on with it. Of course, everybody would say it like this, you know. But so we went through a lot of things with Everett, and I remember sitting there and spending another afternoon when he wanted to cut down on some of the maintenance efforts. Now, the one area you would think he would not cut down would be that, but he was convinced that he had 2 machines, he only needed 1, and we spent all afternoon talking about 2 machines versus 1, and whether or not we should change the oil every week or not. It was just, that was typical, though, of the detail you would get into. Consequently, when you finally got done with all that, the end result was pretty good. You didn't make too many mistakes because it was fully vetted along the way.
Yeah, Everett was very hands-on.
Oh, yeah.
And
hands-on. Yeah.
and very just just really interested, and he turned, it turned out that he turned into a golf lover,
Yep.
and from skiing, and it became obviously a very important part of Boyne, USA, is all the golf courses.
Oh yeah, yeah, it did, and we were fortunate to be part of that. We had this 21-year relationship, and it all started at the mountain for us.
Well, we were talking about memorable holes on Alpine. What are some that really stand out for you?
Well, I like the first hole. I like the start. I like to hit off of a high ridge and see the ball fly. And in truth, you don't have to hit it all that great, and it looks good. And I remember when I playing golf with my parents at 12, 13 years old. The one hole I always waited for was the high hole where you hit a shot. Even I had good looks, good aesthetics of a ball. But I thought it was important to have a good start, and I think it did. I think people got going. Plus, it got you off the mountain in a way. Began to get you down into, as an architect, get you down into more architectural looks of soft hills.
Well, some of the holes going down.
Well, I think as you want to try and get a little more increasingly difficult, so by the time you're at least through most of the golf course, you understand the challenges and so forth. And I think we did that with a couple of different kind of looks. By the time we got around to number 5, which is a very long uphill par 5, and in a way I tried to simulate Oak Hills golf course, number 5, which is 605 yards long. I'll never forget that. It was 605 at Oak Hill. And so we did 595 or something that began to fit the topography there. But it was an uphill hole. It's par 5, went uphill the entire way. So that even makes it longer. I remember that as a particularly satisfying hole for me, with not a lot of bunkers. We used the terrain. I was happy with that. The other par 5, I think, coming further down the mountain now, we had another chance at a par 5 where you had this same vista. You were up on top, dogleg left, and again, you got to experience looking out over the lake, that you could see the lake from there. Then you were out of the upper part of the hills, and you could see the lake, and I always thought that was nice. Then that hole allowed us then to get down to the finishing holes, like 12, 13 into 18, and really some of the best golf topography is then down around those middle holes. And there was a ravine, but you played short of the ravine. The green was on the other side. Maybe you teed off over the ravine. The green was. So I got to interplay and jump back and forth over that, and I think those are what people would call more traditional kind of golf holes. And then the finish hole was I thought, again, it was par 5. And architects love par 5s because you get more shots and more hitting areas, and you really get to use your imagination. But the finish hole, Everett was convinced we needed water on the finish hole, and so we did. We played over some marsh area to get to the hitting area. We never did use a lot of bunker-defined hitting areas, and that probably comes from my background of peat and a little bit of Pinehurst, which I've always had an affinity for. So you have a golf hole, but it has the water, it had the marsh, and the finishing hole, it was part of Everett's design.
Well, that was from the Heather, from the Jones course, and Jones didn't have water, and Everett is the one who put the pond in front of the 18th hole there, and
Pond.
and that right, and then at the Alpine course, like they play the Tournament of Champions there every year, and a young boy from Ann Arbor area, Henry Doe, had shot, I don't know, way down in the 60s at the beginning of this, and he was Dave Kendall was kind of like his mentor, and everybody is saying, well, he's beating you all the time, Dave. And then he had a big lead on the final round, but got a little tight going down there on that 18th hole, and he took a bunch, and then he lost in a playoff. But Henry has become quite an outstanding golfer here in the state, and then I think at University of North Carolina, and kid's a genius. But that water in front of the 18th hole, Everett loves it.
He loves it. It was his inspiration, and and it fits pretty well because there's a lot of marshland down in that particular zone, and so we bled it off to the left into some existing things, and so it fits the scope of what you think is a natural pond rather than completely man-made. But the difference was, and we talked about this with Everett, we actually had to shorten it a little because Everett wanted to almost recreate the 18th of the Highlands to bring it down there and make them shoot 185 yards carry. And I told him, I said, Everett, only pros really are the ones that, because you can only play so close to it. So you might be 200 yards trying to get in there. Well, okay, and he would mumble around. So we shoved it up there pretty close, but it gets the whole architectural effect of water and the hole and the left side and the marsh and all those things. So really, what we've talked about, some of the memorable holes are the par fives, which are typical of a golf architect.
Well, that's the end of our story today with Bill and Everett Kircher at Boyne Mountain and the Alpine course.